My name is Sarah, and for 15 years, I was a dedicated ICU
My
nurse.
name is Sarah, and for 15 years I was a dedicated ICU nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Boston. I grew up in a Christian home, went to church every Sunday, and I thought I had my faith all figured out. But everything I believed was about to be challenged in the most unexpected way. It was a cold November night when they brought him in. Ahmed Hassan, 52 years old, massive heart attack. By the time the ambulance arrived, he had been without oxygen for over 40 minutes. I remember looking at the monitor, seeing that flat line, and thinking what we all thought. This man is gone. There's no coming back from that. The brain can only survive minutes without oxygen, not 40 minutes. It's just not possible. But his family, they refused to give up. His wife, Fatima, she stood in that waiting room with her hands raised, praying in a language I didn't understand. Her daughter held a book, reading verses quietly through her tears. I had seen families pray before, hundreds of times, but this was different. There was something about their certainty, their complete surrender to God that I had never witnessed before. We worked on him for what felt like hours. Dr. Martinez was ready to call it. I was preparing the paperwork in my head. And then, I don't know how to explain this, but his heart just started beating again. Not a weak flutter, not a struggling rhythm, but a strong, steady heartbeat. We all froze. Dr. Martinez looked at me with eyes I'll never forget. He whispered, "That's not medically possible." But here's where it gets even stranger. Ahmed woke up 3 days later, not confused, not brain damaged, not in a vegetative state like we expected. He woke up fully conscious, asking for water, recognizing his family. I had been a nurse for 15 years and I had never seen anything like it. Never. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started avoiding his room because every time I walked past, I felt this uncomfortable feeling in my chest, like something was pulling at me, questioning everything I thought I knew. But one evening, I had to go in to check his vitals. His wife was there, and she was reading from that same book. The sound of her voice, the melody of those words, it stopped me in my tracks. I stood there, frozen, listening. I didn't understand the words, but I felt them. It's hard to explain, but it was like those words were reaching into a part of my soul I didn't even know existed. Tears started rolling down my face, and I didn't even know why. Fatima looked up at me and smiled, the kindest smile I had ever seen. She asked me, "Would you like to know what I'm reading?" I nodded, unable to speak. She told me it was the Quran, the holy book of Islam. She explained that these were the same verses she had been reciting when her husband was dying, the same words she had been praying over him. She said, "We believe that Allah has power over all things. Life and death are in His hands alone." Something in me broke open that night. I had prayed my whole life, but I had never felt that kind of certainty, that kind of complete trust in God. I started asking questions. Fatima never pushed, never preached. She just answered with such patience and wisdom. She gave me a translation of the Quran to read. I went home that night and I couldn't sleep. I opened that book and I started reading. And what I found shook me to my core. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't what I had been told about Islam. It was beautiful. It spoke about Jesus, about Mary, about all the prophets I had grown up learning about. But it presented them in a way that made so much more sense to me. Jesus as a prophet, a messenger, a miracle, but not God himself. God as one, unique, without partners, without division. I had always struggled with the Trinity. I had asked my pastor about it so many times and never got an answer that satisfied my heart. How can God be three and one at the same time? How can God die? How can God have a son? These questions had haunted me for years, but I had pushed them down, thinking I just needed more faith. But reading the Quran, it was like all those questions finally had answers. Clear, logical. beautiful answers. Say, He is Allah, the One, Allah, the eternal refuge. He neither begets nor is born, nor is there to Him any equivalent. Those words hit me like lightning. This was the God I had been searching for my whole life, the God who is beyond our understanding, yet so close to us. The God who doesn't need to become human to forgive us, because His mercy is already infinite. I started researching everything. I watched videos. I read books. I talked to Fatima almost every day. Ahmed recovered fully, by the way. Completely. The doctors called it a medical miracle. They wrote papers about it. But I knew what it really was. It was a sign for me. But I was terrified. What would my family say? What would my friends think? What would happen to my job? I had built my entire life around being a Christian. My identity, my community, everything. The thought of losing all of that was paralyzing. I remember the night I finally made my decision. I was alone in my apartment, and I just broke down crying. I prayed, really prayed, maybe for the first time in my life. I said, God, if Islam is the truth, if this is the path you want me on, please give me the strength. Please guide me. And I felt it. I felt this overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. It was like every doubt, every fear just melted away. I knew what I had to do. The next day, I called Fatima and I told her I was ready. She cried with me on the phone. She invited me to the Islamic Center that Friday. I was so nervous walking in. I had never been inside a mosque before, but the moment I slipped through those doors, I felt welcomed. The sisters greeted me with such warmth, such genuine love. After the prayer, I sat with an imam. He asked me if I understood what I was about to do, if I truly believed that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. I looked him in the eyes and I said yes. Yes, with every fiber of my being. I took my Shahada that day. I testified that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. And the moment those words left my lips, I felt reborn. I felt lighter than I had ever felt in my entire life. Like chains I didn't even know I was carrying had just fallen off. The sisters hugged me, crying, welcoming me into the faith. Fatima held me like I was her own daughter. She whispered in my ear, Allah brought you to us through the hardest moment of our lives. He turned our pain into your guidance. Subhanallah. That's when it all made sense. Ahmed's heart attack, his impossible recovery, my assignment to his case, everything. It wasn't random. It was divine design. Allah had orchestrated every single moment to lead me to this truth. Of course, it wasn't easy after that. Telling my family was the hardest thing I've ever done. My mother cried for weeks. My father didn't speak to me for months. Some of my friends cut me off completely. They thought I had been brainwashed, that I had betrayed Jesus, that I was going to hell. But I hadn't betrayed Jesus. I had finally understood him. I loved him more now than I ever did before, as the mighty prophet and messenger that he was. I honored Mary more now, as the Quran honors her more than any other book. I had found the truth, and no amount of rejection could make me turn away from it. At work, things got complicated. Some colleagues were supportive, others whispered behind my back. But I kept my head down, I did my job with excellence, and I let my character speak for itself. Islam taught me patience, humility, and perseverance in ways I had never experienced. Learning to pray was challenging at first. Waking up before dawn for Fajr, praying 5 times a day while working 12-hour shifts. But every time I put my forehead on the ground, every time I whispered Subhanallah, I felt connected to something greater than myself. I felt purpose. Wearing the hijab was my next step. I was terrified of how people would react, how it would change how they saw me. But the day I wrapped that scarf around my head for the first time, I felt protected. I felt dignified. I felt free. Free from the pressure to look a certain way, to dress a certain way, to please anyone but Allah.